You're traveling to a world that fears but has forgotten the unknown. The unexplained never goes away, lying between science and superstition, between light and containment. It lives in darkness and in our fears, forgotten by most but a few. These few are the SCP Foundation. She never wanted to leave. It was late, and the warm, crackling fire soothed her chilled legs. Samantha let out a happy sigh. They had ended the night by telling scary stories by the campfire. She snuck a glance over at Tommy, who was chatting with his other friends. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck suddenly stand. Her arms wrapped instinctively around her raised knees, her head whipping to glance behind her. Nothing. The trees were a dark, distant blur, swaying gently in the faint wind. The surrounding forest was quiet, except for the light chatter of the other campers. She slowly turned back to face the decaying fire. She was just being paranoid, she told herself. The counselors began to urge the campers to go to their cabin for curfew. She reluctantly stood to leave with her other cabin mates for the night. Tommy caught her eye slightly as he passed. He firmly grabbed her hand, the contact lasting for a brief second. Then he was gone, lost in a crowd of orange look-alike tees and dark gray shorts. There was a crudely folded paper in her hand. She blushed a deep red, cradling the note to her chest. Shuffling along to the cabin, she opened the note. "Meet me outside, cabin 6.
Mrs. Blanchett."
Samantha startled suddenly, the metal chair underneath her squeaking in the small room. The room was white and sparsely decorated. She glanced blearily across the cold metal table, staring at the black tie the man wore.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
The agent sat across from her. He was a stern-looking man, with graying hair and light green eyes. They pierced her own blue eyes as he repeated his question.
"Did you attend Camp Lakewood in 1991?
Samantha's eyebrows furrowed together in remembrance.
Is that what this is about? Yeah, that was... Wow, 2 decades ago? Wow. I was 15, I think. That really takes me back.
He nodded, looking somewhat pleased. It was hard to tell with the straight expression he held on his face. He continued.
What do you remember from your time there?
Her face smoothed, and a wistful smile appeared on her face.
Best summer ever. It was an amazing place. I was so sad to go, especially when we found out it was closing. I made so many friends there, so many great memories. I think, yeah, that's even where I had my first kiss.
The agent quickly marked a notation in his manila folder. She tried to discreetly glance around the raised fold. She felt a sudden cold sweat travel up her spine and creep across her arms. A sickly feeling grew in the pit of her stomach. She was only able to see a few close-up pictures of the dead bark on some trees before he snapped the folder closed. Her eyes stayed on the folder as he continued.
Did you ever see any strange trees to the south of the camp?
Her face was pale, and she felt alarm spread through her.
Huh?
He studied her slowly before he reiterated once more.
2 kilometers to the south, there's a grove of trees. Are you familiar with it?
She recalled very vividly that night. It was the week before the camp would officially be shut down forever. She shook herself mentally, plastering a smile on her face.
I mean, sure. We all were.
The agent frowned at her response, analyzing her expression closely before he pressed on.
In what sense?
Samantha laughingly shook his inquiry off. It was just silly ghost stories, she told him. That's all they were, something the counselors made up. Go walking by the spooky haunted trees. A simple test of courage. She had met Tommy that night at Cabin 6. Their matching bright orange camping tees, a stark contrast to the dark night. They trekked down the hiking trail, whispering to one another, giggling to themselves as they finally got past the canteen and counselor's cabin scot-free. The light was gone, and the moon was obscured by a few clouds. She stumbled in the dark, but Tommy steadied her by offering his hand. With a flushed face, she accepted it. They finally stepped into the grove. They still whispered, despite that no one else was around to hear. Complete silence. She tightly gripped his hand. It loomed before them. It must have been ancient. It had a large, wide trunk and long vertical cracks in the bark. Hideous cankers of all sizes, and a few dead branches hung around it. She held her breath. She jumped at the sudden sound. She was just about ready to scream and run all the way back to camp when Tommy wrapped his arms around her. He instantly calmed her, her wide eyes meeting his soothing brown ones. He laughingly said he had stepped on a branch. She sagged lightly against him, the nerves sapping away from the two of them as they laughed together. They shared their first kiss soon after. Filled with the confidence and reassurance of Tommy and his hand in hers, she eagerly stepped up to the tree, beside a particularly wide canker. She yanked on Tommy's hand, inviting him closer. She stilled. Dread filled her suddenly as she heard it. It was completely unnatural. The tree creaked, and she could not move. It all felt wrong. She turned to Tommy to scream.
Did you ever go there yourself?
Samantha was lost in thought and was silent for a few seconds. The agent leaned forward, slightly impatient now.
Mrs. Blanchette.
Huh? Oh, sorry, no. I never went there. Too scared, I guess. It was a pretty crazy summer, you know? Sometimes I really miss that place.
SCP-437 is a large grove of trees located south of Camp Lakewood, Illinois. The trees, each of various species common to North America, are designated as SCP-437-A. Approximately 64 instances of SCP-437-A were discovered and cataloged by the Foundation in 2011. Due to its large location, SCP-437 has been classed as Euclid. Though each instance of SCP-437-A is a relatively normal tree native to the area, each tree also has multiple cankers. Cankers are round-shaped dead sections of bark on a tree, usually an indicator of diseased bark. This can be caused by bacteria and fungi. If it spreads to the trunk, it would completely kill the tree. What initially attracted the Foundation to this location is the anomalous secretion produced by these trees. Trees are known to normally produce sap. These particular trees, however, contain copious amounts of blood. Human blood. It was challenging to extract any viable DNA from SCP-437-A, whether that was due to the quality of the blood samples or time spent securing and classifying the SCP is unknown. It wasn't until 2014 that the first match was found using hospital records. This match was Mrs. Samantha Blanchette, who was subsequently interviewed by Agent Bennet, a member of the Foundation's Mobile Task Force, Iota 10. The interview revealed a few things, according to the agent's recording and notes. Camp Lakewood was a summer camp that, at the time of the interview, shut down permanently over 20 years ago. Its last opening was in the summer of '91. It was a vast camp, with many activities, and was usually fully reserved each summer up to its closing, which makes this whole thing even stranger. A completely abandoned summer camp. Any records, including employment records it should maintain and store, were lost. Samantha was the only connection to SCP-437 that the Foundation had. Why did the camp shut down? With the missing employment records, it could be determined that perhaps the counselors themselves had some idea of SCP-437-A's anomalous properties. Or maybe they were simply ghost stories. Samantha was the only connection to SCP-437 until she soon after escaped custody by what we can only assume were anomalous means. She has since been labeled a person of interest in connection to SCP-437, POI 437-15. This led the Foundation to further prioritize gaining more blood samples in hopes of finding more matches. What really happened at Camp Lakewood? All instances of SCP-437-A are currently being cared for by Foundation horticulturists. They care and monitor each tree to ensure they stay healthy in spite of their cankers. While it is a relatively unknown area, a fence perimeter was established to secure the deserted location. While testing was ongoing, the difficulty of extracting viable samples and finding matches continued. After Samantha, there were a few more matches discovered. However, when Foundation personnel were sent to investigate them, they were found to be recently reported missing. Ever since, the procedure has now been established to capture any POI associated with SCP-437 and place them in Foundation custody along with their children. As of 2016, all testing has been halted and prohibited by the Ethics Committee. Any requests for testing are pending review for SCP-437-A, including an ongoing request for euthanization. Initially, Samantha's take on the trees, or instances of SCP-437-A, had been dismissed as just a fictional tale, but Dr. Weiss figured there may be more to it. Dr. Weiss, one of the personnel overlooking the regular research and testing of SCP-437-A, ordered that technical equipment be brought to SCP-437. On July 20th, 2016, he and his team took radiographic and ultrasound imaging of each instance of SCP-437-A. What they found inside was alarming. Bones and organs. The bones were severely deformed. The organs were woven into the very trees themselves. The ultrasound revealed that the organs seemed to be semi-functional. They determined through the radiographical imaging that each instance of SCP-437-A contained what appeared to be a humanoid skeletal structure. A structure similar to that of adolescent humans between the ages of 13 and 16. In some cases, they were even able to identify the bones using dental records taken before 1991. In an email written by Dr. Weiss to the site director, he summarizes his discoveries. This email is what led to all the testing to be halted by the Ethics Committee.
I don't think your POIs are the campers, Jeremiah. I suggest we sub-designate them as part of SCP-437. As for the SCP-437-A instances themselves, I want to look into the possibility of euthanizing them. They've been in there for 20 years. When you press your ear against the bark, you can hear them.
The summer of '91 was supposed to be a carefree summer. A place where campers could share their first kiss and tell scary stories by the campfire. Instead, it was a place where innocent teens were trapped and have been ever since. What took their place seems to have retained all their memories and assumed their personality. They may also be able to quickly communicate with one another, since after Samantha's, or POI 437-15's, escape, all the other campers were quick to disappear and leave no trace. What left Camp Lakewood after that last summer can only be described as some variation of a doppelganger. Doppelgangers, according to mythology, are usually a double of a person that shares the same memories and feelings it is copying from. Though no anomalous activities are presumed to have occurred before the summer of '91, perhaps this was the beginning of SCP-437-A's anomalous properties. The camp was about to be completely abandoned. never to be visited again. Complete and utter isolation, surrounded by nothing but forest. Trees themselves are alive. Perhaps they sensed that this was their last summer surrounded by life. They took this as their only opportunity to escape.
I mean, it was goofy kid stuff, you know? Stories the counselors would tell around the campfire. Spooky trees down the southern trail. Something trapped inside them. Go there at night, press your ear against the bark, and you can hear it singing.
That summer, the ghost stories became real.